Hi guys, Goffy here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I want to talk about the Fujifilm lens that I've just never really spoken about, even though I owned it for 3 to 4 years, and I think it's probably my most used lens as well. Now the main reason that you guys have just never seen this lens on the channel is because it's the one you guys are always looking through. It's the one that's almost permanently attached to my camera when it comes to video. And that lens is this. This is the Fujifilm 16-55mm F2.8. It's my absolute workhorse lens, and in today's video I want to talk about it because there is one big problem with this lens, big being a pretty good word there, that I just don't really like. And at times it's got me thinking about changing to a different lens. So in today's video, let's get cracking, let's talk about this guy. So first up then, what do we actually have here? This is a 16-55mm, which from a full frame point of view, I guess that makes it 24 to 80 something. It's f2.8 all of the way through that focal range, which leads this into being a very, very versatile lens. You can use this for just about everything. At the wide end, it's great. At the long end, it's also perfect for portraits. f2.8 might seem a little bit slow, but genuinely, if you shoot at the 55 end, you get more than enough background separation. Inside the lens, we have got 17 elements in 12 groups, some pretty exotic glass in here as well, which probably makes up some of its retail price. This is a Fuji red label zoom. They don't really make red label lenses anymore, but when these lenses first came out, because this is pretty old now, 2015 I think it was released, they had this like red label zoom collection, which was like the best lenses that they could make, and they also came with a pretty high price tag. Fujifilm on their website actually talk about this lens being as good as their primes. Now it sounds like a pretty big statement to make, but I think if you were shooting primes at f2.8, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference. Optically, this thing is awesome. The lens does zoom externally. Now, this did kind of concern me a little bit, especially because they claim that it's weather sealed as well. But the reality is I've used this in some pretty heavy downpours at this point, and I've never had a problem. So I fully believe that a externally zooming lens can be genuinely weather sealed. Now, the big problem with this lens, big being a pretty good word, is the fact that it's big. This is a heavy, chunky lens. This weighs 650 grams. Now you might be laughing a little bit if you shoot full frame cameras, but at 650 grams, this weighs the same as my XH2S. I find on the XH2S that once it's actually attached to my camera, it's actually not too bad. It doesn't feel uncomfortably heavy or anything, just I know that it's in my camera bag. If you were to stick this on an XE camera, it does feel pretty ridiculous. I have done that in the past, and I just really didn't like that experience because you just don't have the grip on those smaller cameras to make this feel comfortable. I've taken so many pictures with this lens that even from a photography point of view, not just a video point of view, this has got to be my most used Fuji lens at this point. I've taken some of my favorite landscapes and favorite portraits with this lens. Now, when it comes to portraits, you might think that I would have taken better portraits on my prime lenses. That's just not the case. Looking through my library, my favorite portrait pictures I've taken have been with this. Using f2.8 at the 55mm end, you get some really nice background separation, even on that little tiny crop sensor that Fuji use. When it comes to video, I record all of my YouTube videos on this lens. It actually felt a little bit weird using the 10-24 today and trying to set up this kind of studio setup in the same way, because I'm so used to using this thing. Basically everything you've seen for the last, I think, 3 years on this YouTube channel will have been recorded with this. This is why you've never seen it. Now when it comes to a video, the spec that kind of lets this lens down is the fact it doesn't have optical stabilization. I found that the IBIS in the modern Fuji cameras more than make up for that, and I'm still happy using it. Do I wish it had optical stabilization? Probably, but I wouldn't want this lens to be any bigger than it already is. Now, Fuji made a statement on their website that this is as good as their primes, and I genuinely think that if I was to shoot this f2.8 and compare it to any Fuji prime I've owned, optically I would not be able to tell you the difference. Primes clearly have that like benefit of being a bit faster, so you're going to get pictures with the faster lenses you can't really replicate with this, but if you are shooting at slower speeds, I genuinely don't think I could tell you the difference. I do think sometimes, especially because of social media, using primes has become a bit of a trend and a little bit of a badge of honor at times, almost proof that you're a good photographer. Whereas in a lot of cases, a zoom lens is actually the right answer, especially if you know you're going to be changing focal lengths quite a bit, or you're just not really using the speed that primes offer. Now for me in Venice, I actually packed some prime lenses and this, and when I packed this, I thought to myself, do you know what, I probably don't really need it. But when I was walking around Venice, I ended up leaving all of the primes in the hotel and just taking this lens because I found myself changing focal length so much and I didn't really need the speed in Venice because it was bright and sunny. So I think sometimes we just put off using zooms because they're not on trend at the minute, are they? Lots of people like to shoot primes, and I do think sometimes we pick prime lenses over zoom lenses for the wrong reasons. Now, I think for many of us, we can probably understand that optically, lenses haven't changed all that much in the last 8 years, but when it comes to things like autofocus, things have changed quite a lot. However, this lens, honestly, is still one of the best lenses I've used in the autofocus department. For all of my YouTube videos, it's permanently set to eye tracking and I've never had a problem with it. For photography, I genuinely think it's as good as the modern primes. There is one downside though to an 8-year-old lens from a Fuji perspective, and that's the fact that the competition has stiffened up a little bit. And for me, there is a lens that is really starting to take my fancy, and that is the Sigma 18-50mm F2.8. Now that Sigma lens loses quite a bit of focal range. This is 16mm, the Sigma is 18mm. It only sounds like 2mm worth of difference, but at the wide end, that will look like a lot. And at the long end, the Sigma is 50mm and this is 55, so you're losing 5mm at the long end as well. But both of them are f2.8 all the way through. But the Sigma does have two big advantages. First of all, it costs half as much, but the big one for me is it weighs half as much as well. Beyond that, the Sigma is going to be a downgrade in pretty much every way. The Sigma's not weather sealed, I don't think the Sigma has an aperture ring either, and optically I can't imagine the Sigma is as good as this. So why then am I considering the downgrade? And for me, it all comes down to the weight. Now, when I go out and record a YouTube video, you guys never see this thing, but I'm always lugging it around with me. Tomorrow I plan on making a video with my Leica M10 and I'm going to be using a new lens on that camera, and I'm going to be making that video using the XH2S and this thing. And I sometimes get really annoyed about the fact that the video camera that you never see is the bit that takes up the most space in my camera bag and also the most weight. So for me, the weight saving of 300 or 400 grams I think is worth taking a little bit of a hit when it comes to focal range and optical quality. And I think this poses a really interesting question. At what point does the weight of a lens matter more than the optical performance of a lens? And for everybody, this is going to be slightly different, but for me, this lens is very close to that tipping point, because nobody's going to run around with a 20-kilogram lens even if it's optically perfect, but nobody's going to run around with a 10-gram lens if it's optically naff. So at what point does that balance kind of tip a little bit too far for your own personal preference? And for me, like I said, this one is very close to that at the minute. I think though, if you don't care about the weight and you're just going to use it for photography as well, you are not going to be disappointed with this lens. I've never once used this lens and gone back and looked at the photos or the video and thought, I wished I'd use a different one. I do sometimes just wish I hadn't carried it around in my camera bag all day, because it is a heavy lens. So if you're interested in this lens and you don't mind about the weight, I honestly don't think you're going to be disappointed, because there's nothing really here to be disappointed about, and that's probably why I've not reviewed it, because it's a pretty boring lens to use. As long as you know what you're buying, you're not going to be disappointed. If you've enjoyed this video though guys, please do not forget to like and subscribe. There's plenty more Fuji, Leica and travel content coming to the channel very soon. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!